Yeah.
No, sissy, don't do it.
Is it the public one?
Yeah, but he's okay now. He won't stop the sirens at all.
Yeah, Coop, sometimes with those noises, I mean, it is very, like, even as an adult, it's like, so I understand why sometimes they're, like, too loud.
Chief put them in the evidence lockers back there when they're brand new, thankfully.
Yeah, well, he said now he, like, he's like, now he owns the place. He goes in there, he knows where the candy is.
Yes.
I'm like, he's like, my mom's the mayor.
I know. I wonder how the teachers are going to hear
Totally
that.
joking, but
No,
wouldn't
no,
it be
he
funny if he
literally
said
is.
that?
He said at preschool. Sorry.
Oh, he's like, don't talk to me, my mom's the mayor. I could see my son saying that, so.
Yes. Are we all quiet group? Okay.
That's
It's so
right.
weird since we're on. You too. Okay. No, he's on vacation or he's out. Yes. If everybody, I'd like to call the meeting to order. If everybody would stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Lupton, if you would call the roll.
Mayor Carney,
Here.
Mr. Rucker, Ms. Giano,
Here.
Heineman,
Here.
Ms. Pine,
Here.
Mr. Reed,
Here.
Mr. Terry,
Here.
And do I have an approval of the agenda for tonight's meeting, or motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve tonight's agenda?
Second.
Giano,
Yes.
Heineman,
Yes.
Pine,
Yes.
Reed,
Yes.
Terry,
Yes.
And motion to approve the work session minutes from August 4th, 2021?
I just noticed, I believe there was the time that we ended was off by an hour, I think, but other than that, I think it was good. Because I was like, I don't think we were here that late.
One other,
You had something else?
yeah, the heading on it says council meeting agenda, at least on my copy. And yeah, just small little edit there.
Any other additions or corrections? Is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Second.
Terry,
Yes.
Reed,
Yes.
Pine,
Yes.
Heineman,
Yes.
Giano.
Yes.
And Ms. Lupton, do we have any visitors?
I didn't have
Checking.
anybody contact me.
Okay. Thank you. Moving out of visitors into reports, just wanted to wrap up. We, at our last meeting, we had started Safety Town and wanted to give a quick wrap up. I want to thank our Plain City Police Department and Pleasant Valley Fire District for really stepping up and helping to make that event successful. We had 66 incoming kindergartners to graduate. And I also want to thank Ms. Petrovia and of the Journal Tribune and Madison Messenger for giving a nice coverage of the event. Also between that week, last week of July and to this meeting, we had Rock the Clock here in Plain City, and that event is hosted by Mr. Tim Dawson. Just wanted to really thank him for his work on putting on a great event. I think in our wrap-up meeting, we said that it would be impossible for the village to take on at this time an event of that magnitude, and so his work that he did with that, it was a really great evening if you were able to attend. I think everybody enjoyed the music and entertainment. With that, that's all I had for my mayor report, and moving on to finance director.
The only thing I have is that I reported earlier that my audit was going on. It is done. I just haven't received the actual report yet. That there was no red flags, nothing at all. I've done the report. I think the state auditor's office is reviewing the auditor's report. So that's all I have.
That is wonderful. Thank you. Good job, Ms. Sonnet. Chief McKee.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Detective Greenbaum conducted a presentation on workplace violence for the staff at Edgewater Place living facility out here. This Friday, as you all know, will be Administrative Assistant Sherry Yoakum's last day. That position was posted today. As the mayor indicated, the Rocket Clock event went very well this year with minor issues. The parking was handled very well, with we received no complaints during the whole show. We actually patrolled the area and tried to find 15 violations and couldn't find them. So that was handled very well. Mr. Dawson also had a bus that was a transport vehicle that was shuttling people back and forth, which worked out really great. It's as expected that there were 4,045 people that attended the event, unless you have some different numbers.
I just think total probably was 7,000 in and out, but 4,500.
It's hard to kind of gauge everybody that was there all at one time. As the mayor said, the PD, the mayor, the fire department, administration staff, and the event organizer met last week for an after-action review of the event and discuss what went well this year and what we can improve on next year. And lastly, I would just like to thank the police department staff and also the public works staff for all the outstanding work they did in the month of July. We were really busy in July with the 4th of July celebration, the Steam Pressure Show, the Safety Calendar Rocket Clock event. We dealt with some very large crowds for long hours, and I think everybody just did an excellent job with that. So kudos to all of them, and that's all I have at this time here.
Thank you, Chief. And yes, July was a very long month for staff, and it was well noted in the village. We appreciated all the events and having a normal summer. Mr. Cowhall, Village Administrator.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just to kind of highlight a couple things here. On the agenda tonight, and Mr. Lafayette can provide more background if desired. Before you is of course, the state didn't give us too much time to react to it, but there's a resolution or an ordinance, I guess, tonight related to the opioid litigation settlement and the national settlement. The state of Ohio has asked all local jurisdictions to consider adopting the terms and conditions of that settlement. If there's a critical mass of communities across the state, and then eventually a critical mass of all the states across the country, then that settlement would be effectuated nationwide. Long story short, as a smaller community, we'll probably be looking at upwards of about $20,000 coming our way per the terms of the settlement. Time for that is to be determined. The draft 22 operating and capital improvement plan budgets were sent out this week, or late last week, I guess, to Personnel Finance and CIP committee membership. Staff continues to make a few tweaks around the edges as we have some more known pricing, but wanted to get that out to the group ahead of time. Also looking at, concurrent to that, our internal update to the compensation plan for our employees, and looking at some staffing plan changes this upcoming year and into the future. So some of the personnel costs may be subject to change, but we'll talk that through with the committees and get their temperature on those before the formal submittal to council. I want to congratulate some of our public works staff. They've obtained their commercial pesticide and herbicide and other applicator licenses to the Department of Agriculture, so that allows us to spray chemicals on our turf and trees and bushes and everything else across town under their license. So that's a good thing for us. We submitted our request for prioritization to the county engineer today related to House Bill 168's water and wastewater grant funding. The next step of that is staff will be completing the applications online that go through ODOD with EPA looking over their shoulders. We are proceeding to closing on the property there off of Jackson Street. We're playing a little bit of phone tag with the property owner on coordinating the title company's work and getting that all taken care of, and hopefully we close before the end of the month. That's the hope, but we're at the whim at the title company. The water treatment plant north water main project will go out to advertisement Thursday. We'll be opening towards the end of the month, and we'll see where those bids come in at. It's a critical piece of infrastructure for redundancy of our water distribution system. In case one of the other main trunk lines were to ever go down, we could backfeed the entire system through that. The parking lot bid, as you see on the agenda, is before you for contract award tonight. Staff's asking for a waiver of the second reading so that we can execute that contract post haste and get underway. The streetscape project, the rebid on that one opens Thursday at 3, so hopefully we'll have some glad tidings to share in the Friday letter to everybody. And then pursuant to our last meeting, work session Wednesday night, staff had a chance to sit down and kind of look through again with a fine-tooth comb some of the ideas that were shot out on possible amendments to Chapter 1327 on the DRB stuff. And we'll start with the first item, which would be noticing of the meetings and timeframes. And after we got looking at it and the issues I think maybe have occurred in the recent past, staff's in mind to recommend to council consideration if you're thinking about considering a minor amendment on the timing of things. It doesn't appear necessarily after we really looked at it one more time, and Taylor was a godsend in terms of she lives and breathes this and had some good insight. Some of our timing now that the DRB has set monthly meetings on a specific date, the issue we've run into some timing isn't necessarily the notification of the meetings as much now has been the time frame for which the DRB has to act within. So right now, the way the code is structured, it's 60 days. They have to render a decision up, down, or indifferent within 60 days of an application being submitted. What staff is recommending, if it's your druthers to change anything at all, would be to have that clock start from when the hearing is initially heard on that application.
When it's first heard by
When
the.
it's first heard.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so I think that'll help with some of the timing and kind of the front end. We can add some proposed language that would say, hey, we also have to hold a hearing within a certain amount of time when something's applied for it. And so just wanted to throw that past you folks. And then the second question then would be the other item on the DRB amendment list as a potential amendment is the thought is to consider a complete, so if someone wants to appeal a decision of the DRB, is the thought of council, how do you want this drafted? Do you want this proposal drafted that it's a complete rehearing of the case? Or is it more a procedural and interpretive review, much like the BZA might make of the planner in making a decision whether maybe to issue a permit, not issue a permit, give somebody 30 days to fix a violation versus 2 months, or is the druthers of council to want to have a complete review?
Mr. Cahill,
Yeah.
since we have our solicitor back, the question you asked about whether it's procedural or whether it's a do-over, I'd like the solicitor to weigh in on that. I have no idea what he's going to say, but the words de novo were tossed about in reference to the type of hearing and what it actually was. So,
Mr. We have this as a discussion item later.
Oh, we do? I
Can we
apologize.
push this
I
to
apologize.
the appropriate time?
Yes.
Thank you.
Totally forgot. I apologize.
Thank you.
With that, I'll be quiet there. We can continue on.
Thank you, Mr.
I
Capel.
wasn't paying attention to the discussion.
Before we got really deep into it, I was like,
Rehash again.
I need to just read the whole agenda first. Yeah.
Yes. And then Mr. Rucker with President Pro Tem isn't here, but would somebody like to recap the work session?
It went great. Minutes are reflective of the discussion, and we have another one scheduled for the first Wednesday next month.
Thank you. Mr. Lafayette, Law Director?
Not a lot to report other than the opioid settlement. The way that the settlement, it's roughly 800 and some odd change $1 million that's payable to the state of Ohio, and it's broken down between percentage to the state, percentage to municipalities, and percentage to a foundation, One Ohio Fund. And it's payable over 18 years, so they're not dropping $800 million this year. But it's over 18 years, and there'll be a board put together for some of the future fund expenditures. But in order to accept it, we have to have a signed participation agreement back to them by August 13th this week. So we need to have that passed as an emergency tonight, so that I can sign off on it and return it first thing in the morning. And other than that, you guys, the other things I'm working on, obviously the noise ordinance and the DRB, as well as some issues with Mr. Cahall concerning some of the development projects.
Thank you, Mr. Lafayette. Capital improvements, Ms. Giamo.
We had to reschedule our meeting, so we'll now be meeting August 25th,
Thank you.
and that is all from me.
Thank you very much. BZA.
Yeah, no one met the deadline and submitted anything for August, so we will not have a meeting in August. However, I don't know for the solicitor, do we need to get everyone to like sign off?
We do have to have everybody sign off
So
on the findings.
what I might suggest to Taylor is to have everyone come that night, sign on the prior month, and then go home. We
Yep.
want to have a formal meeting just for members to sign off on some previous decisions.
On the findings, yep.
Perfect. I'll send Taylor some.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Terry. Planning and zoning.
We don't have a council member on planning and zoning
Oh my
anymore.
goodness, that's me. I'm so sorry. Thank you. This is gonna take me a few more meetings and we have a meeting coming up August 18th, and I believe I will be getting with Ms. Brill to go over the agenda, so I will have a report for the 23rd, because we did not meet in July. Parks and Recreation.
We should have a meeting tomorrow at 6:30.
Thank you, Ms. Heineman. Personnel and Finance.
We'll have our meeting with CIP on the 25th, she tells me, which is good because I forgot the date. At that meeting, and this is just a heads up, I think council needs to do at this point because I don't know how it's going to fly in the committee. I'm going to raise the question of whether CIP and Personnel and Finance should actually merge as a committee. And principally because it's been working the way we've been doing it pretty well. The only problem with it is that when people have sat there and listened to all the issues, who are perfectly well qualified to vote on them, but only half the committee can vote if it's CIP or if it's Personnel and Finance. So I'm going to ask the committee if they would prefer to merge so they can fully participate in all the discussions and the voting and see how that flies. And the concept that I'm going to toss out is that we'll still have 2 council members assigned, one for CIP, part of the discussion, and one for the Personnel and Finance part. So you'll still get independent views of the content, but that's going to be tossed out in the meeting of the 25th, see how the committee thinks about it, and then we'll come back to council and see what council thinks about it. So let's see, and we do have the budget now, so this is going to be a really interesting and labor-intensive process getting through the 2022 budget, because if you didn't notice, it's doubled the allocation appropriation request for this year. Is up to $32 million, which is, explainable really easily in terms of what it's being used for. But there's, it's all the rest of it, the impact on it and other projects that council may be interested in doing in that space. So just heads up for you. That's it, Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. I have a question. When you are discussing about merging the committees, and I know Mr. Terry is like the backup member on personnel, would you,
I'd probably just resign. Is that right, Paul?
because that would be 3
Paul.
council members.
I would think that.
You
Well-
wouldn't be able to,
Well, it's only half, and
that's
we would
only
need
half,
4.
that wouldn't be a quorum.
Yeah,
That would be
So we should be
We can still
okay.
have 3. on
yeah. If we had 4,
there.
that's
And
pushing
I
it.
think he's the valuable member of the committee, so,
Okay, just wanted to clarify.
Sorry.
Well, as an alternate, don't you only have to attend as needed?
I attend most of the time.
Oh, I gotcha.
Is there a financial incentive for legal opinion the other way?
Okay.
Alright.
Not in the minutes.
Okay, moving on. Fire board, which
I went.
You went,
Yes.
okay, thank you.
Yes, it was a robust meeting. I was like, this will be refreshing after a almost 3 hour long council work session. That meeting was about an hour and a half. The fire district's in the process of hiring 1 full-time and 2 part-time firefighters, and in September there's a pretest scheduled for this month, so in September they're potentially hiring 3 to 4 more part-time firefighters. They are hosting a Essentials of Fire Investigation class in November, which allows one of their firefighters to have a seat at the class for free, and this saves them from traveling. I think the cities that they would have to travel to for this class would have been like in Alabama or Illinois. I can't quite remember. The fire district's also looking into some type of notification system for weather alerts and emergencies, similar to how our app works. I don't know if there's been any further dialogue, Chief, but they may, Chief Kidd may reach back out and just see if there's an option for fire district.
We had actually asked them when we did our.
Yes, they said that, but now they're looking at Code Red, so I don't know. I think we're going to talk about it a little bit more at the September meeting. They also stressed how busy they were over July, and actually they're thinking that with events, they think they want to have more planning time for especially large events. So they'll probably be reaching out to the village.
Yeah, we've already discussed.
Yeah.
Some stuff like that with Nathan.
Yeah. Yep, and the next meeting is September 2nd at 6:30 at the fire hall.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And Ms. Rucker's not here for Design Review Board. Mr. Cahall, do you want to give an update on that?
I believe, I should have asked Taylor for the latest update. I do not believe there's anything on the docket for this month, I believe.
Wait, there is something on the
No,
docket.
there is, and I'm trying to remember what it is.
That meeting won't be until the 25th either, will it?
Yeah,
So we'll have another council meeting before that.
yeah, I'm remiss. I think we actually do have one agenda item, I believe.
But it's on the 25th.
Maybe that Wednesday, yes.
Okay. And you have the 2 meetings.
DRB will be in here.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we had already kind of talked about, I think, where each group would be.
Okay, that's right. We did that at the work session last week. Okay. And then Rules Committee.
I did do a review of the minutes for this year, and the Rules Committee does exist. It was established at the first meeting of the year, which I had forgotten about, and 2 people were assigned to it, and since we've added a 3rd. So my concern with the committee members have documents to review, so we're not just stalled here, is that we're stymied in terms of being able to discuss what's in the documents freely and easily because of the constraints on meetings that are boards or commissions or committees of the council, which requires open meetings and minutes and the whole shebang. Announcements 24 hours in advance, since we have pretty much are doing special meetings. We don't have a regular schedule at this point. So I proposed something to the solicitor. He's going to consider it and get back to me, which could alleviate the whole problem. And so we'll see how this works out. And so stay tuned.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Reed? Moving out of reports into old business, we have no old business, so moving into new business. First reading resolution 27-2021, a resolution authorizing the village administrator to accept the bid of and execute an agreement with Byrne and Jones Construction for the Plain City Uptown Parking Lot Improvement Project and requesting a waiver of the second reading.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I just have a question about one little apostrophe S in here in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th, whereas in the meetings. It says Jones Constructions with apostrophe S on it. I'm not sure.
That's a typo.
Is that what it is, typo?
Yes, that
It
is.
looked like a typo, I just want
Yes.
to make sure it was
Yes.
correct there. So that's the only issue in that.
We'll fix that accordingly. Thank you, Mr. Reed.
Motion to waive second reading of resolution 27-2021.
Second.
Terry,
Yes.
Reed,
Yes,
Pine,
Yes.
Heineman,
Yes.
Giano,
Yes.
Motion to approve resolution 27-2021.
Second.
Giano,
Yes.
Terry,
Yes.
Heineman,
Yes.
Reed,
yes,
Pine,
Yes.
First reading resolution 28-2021, a resolution authorizing and directing the village administrator to enter into a pre-annexation agreement with Norman A. Beachy and Lois F. Beachy trustees. First reading ordinance 24-2021, an ordinance authorizing the village solicitor to accept the material terms of the One Ohio subdivision settlement pursuant to the One Ohio Memorandum of Understanding and consistent with the terms of the July 2nd, 2021 National Opioid Settlement Agreement, and requesting a waiver of the second reading and declaring an emergency.
motion to waive second reading.
Second.
Pine,
Yes.
Heineman,
Yes.
Terry,
Yes.
Reed,
Yes,
Giano,
Yes.
Motion to approve ordinance 24-2021 as emergency.
second,
Giano,
Yes.
Reed,
yes,
Heineman,
Yes.
Pine,
Yes.
Terry,
Yes.
And is there a motion authorizing the administrator to advertise for sale municipal properties located at 213 South Chillicothe Street pursuant to the terms and conditions generally detailed in Exhibit A included in the council meeting packet?
So moved.
Second.
Terry,
Yes.
Reed,
yes,
Giano,
Yes.
Heineman,
Yes.
Pine,
Yes.
Thank you. Moving out of new business into our discussion items, and then the first topic is trick or treat. So this has been kind of thrown around a little bit around the community. Usually we've gone with Morpsey, but last year it was on Saturday, and we kept it on Halloween. This year it's on Sunday. My suggestion would be to keep it on Sunday and have it from 5 to 7. I think it would give parents and community members time to enjoy the trick-or-treating hours with it not being too dark and allowing the children to get good rest before they go to school the next day.
Get sugared up before they have to
Yes.
go to bed.
is that pretty much the same thing we did last year?
Yes.
We
Seems
did
to work pretty
earlier in
well.
the day though because it was still kind of
I think we did 4 to
COVID
6.
and
Yeah.
Ohio
Yeah,
State
5 to
game
7
and
weekend.
just, yeah, it was just, we were thinking maybe with wearing masks, we should do it in the daylight instead of the dark, so.
So in my informal conversations with neighbors, they love that idea. The only thing was that one person brought up, and I don't know if we would do this, is like, should we schedule it or should we at least think about having Saturday as like a weather day? Because like someone kept saying like a couple of years ago, it was like really nice weather and that we were rigid on not moving it. And then like the day was actually coming, it was like snowing. So I don't know if we want to think about something like that. Just one of my neighbors brought it up when I asked him about this stuff, so.
Like having, like, if we can see the forecast and saying it's not very good.
I think that was kind of like the idea, because I think it was like a week that was like really nice and then like a snowy, I don't really remember it, but they were like complaining about it, like, and they're like, and we couldn't move it, but everyone wanted it, not Friday because of football, and then later, so either Saturday or Sunday, so just, I think Sunday's perfectly fine, but maybe we consider like, if we see it coming, we move it to Saturday or move it to Monday.
Oh.
That was the only thought process in it.
I don't think we've ever done that, I just, I mean, it is
It's
what
kind of,
it
it's
is.
kind of conflicting because
Yeah,
the other thing is like, if you're a parent and you like happen to have an hourly job, right?
yeah,
And you take off work Sunday,
right,
and then all of a sudden we move it to Saturday. This was my
Yeah,
response to the person.
right.
I was like, then what are you doing to those people? Because then they're like,
That's why I think we've just always, it
Leave
is
it.
what it is, rain or
Right.
shine,
just
Yeah.
probably-
snow or hail.
I hand out, I don't walk around, I hand out, so I'm
We've had it
fine.
all.
It's usually tough to do that too, for scheduling overtime for that.
For you guys. No worries, I'm cool with it.
Last year was beautiful weather, so
Yeah.
I think if we'd gone with like what everybody around us had done, it was Thursday and it was cold and rainy, and then we lucked out.
The year before that, it was so cold on the playground, the kids were in tears.
Gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
We could not even stand outside. I just left the candy. I was like, just
Yeah.
take it. I can't be outside.
So October 31st, 5 to 7.
5 to 7.
Perfect. Okay.
Are we gonna have the alternate day? in?
No.
No, because I think,
Seems too complicated.
yeah. I think if it was before, like if it was a Saturday, then if the Saturday was not so good, then move it to
And if they had to go
Sunday.
forward, I would be back.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Mhm. Design Review Board ordinance. Now we can go into the discussion.
The refrigerator just spit ice on the
Hmm.
floor.
All right, so Mr. Reed, you were going in for a question here?
Oh, yeah, the solicitor, I think, was gonna make some comments about what the procedure is in an appeal, what can do, what you can't do, that kind of stuff, so.
Okay, so, I did watch the video from the previous meeting, watched it after the meeting. Just to kind of walk everybody through, under 132711, that's the appellate, I guess, procedure portion of the DRB code. And the issue I have, and why I would suggest some changes, I mean, they're not massive changes to it, but we need some clarity in here. The standards as they exist, and I think Mr. Holtis in my place last week talked a little bit about how the differences between the Court of Appeals hears things, and Mr. Cowhall discussed it tonight, kind of how we look at the way the BZA hears appeals from the zoning inspector's decision. There's a difference between de novo having a full rehearing of the case. Evidence and everything comes in, that's a de novo hearing. And the other side of it, you have a determination on whether an error was made in the interpretation of the statute or a procedure. Typically, courts of appeals look for plain error. That's what a court of appeals would do. And I think that's what Mr. Holtis was discussing. With our DRB code, that's the way I believe it should be. And again, it's partially a policy decision, but it should be a plain error because it's very similar to what we would do with the BZA. If Ms. Brill, in making a determination on a decision on interpretation of one of our zoning codes, and she says, no, I'm going to deny your application for whatever, permit to do whatever. Or she finds them in violation of saying, well, your grasp is 6 inches high and it's only allowed to be 5, and they say it's plain error because it wasn't that tall. They can appeal it to the BZA, and BZA reviews that evidence and say, did she interpret it wrong? Did she apply it wrong? And that's it. But you're looking at more of a plain error in both the process and the interpretation of the code. When you get into a full rehearing, you're more arguing the merits. The de novo is more of an arguing of the merits of why I should have this whole thing. And it's particularly in the DRB, it's like a rehashing of the whole case. Now, I will tell you that the previous advice that I've given you based on this code section, because we've only ever, since I've been here, had the one appeal of a DRB decision. And what I had recommended to council is because of the way that our code is written and because it's not as clear and it doesn't really address whether we're reviewing just for plain error or whether we're looking at the overall application, I recommended a full de novo review because that gives the applicant and the appealing party the most due process. Just because our code didn't say it, but if our code was clearer and didn't limit it to reviewing strictly for plain error or interpretation, interpretive decisions by the DRB as opposed to rehearing it, that would be appropriate, and we just need to clean the language up to say that. So, because from a practical standpoint, you don't want to have complete rehearings of the case. That's why you have a DRB. And, frankly, the way, the way it can be brought, any appeal could be, I mean, you're basically having rehearings all the time, anytime somebody didn't like the way it came out. And then council be in the position of being a secondary DRB and going through the whole code. And that's, I don't think that's the intent of our code section.
So how is it now? Is it de novo or is it procedural?
Right now, it's de novo.
Okay.
Only because, and again, my interpretation of this is that our code section isn't clear on that. And so I'm always gonna err on the side of the applicant to provide them with the most due process. So we're doing de novo right now based on my recommendation. I think that needs to be tightened up, and I think it really should be just a plain error standard.
But in that, we're supposed to be looking to see if we feel that the board actually made an error.
Yeah, if they made an error.
Okay.
If they, you know, again, I'm trying to think of a good example of something. Again, design review board's a little bit different, but, you know, let's say we had a color, we have a color palette, and somebody provided something and saying, well, my application submitted a proposed color that's on the color palette, and it should have been accepted, and the DRB said, no, we have, slate gray, but that's got too much blue in it, so we don't think that fits. That doesn't work. And so then it's an interpretation. That's more of a procedural issue for whether or not the DRB misinterpreted it, or they just said, no, you may think that's slate gray, but we don't think it's slate gray, so. But it's not gonna be like a full rehearing of the entire application.
Yeah, interestingly, I'm trying to think this through. In either case, whether it's de novo or procedural, it amounts to the same discussion.
Not really.
It's
gonna be
procedurally,
limited
they
issue.
didn't apply the procedures right. Hear me out.
Okay.
That the procedure was that if it's on the color palette, you approve it. The question is whether it's on the color palette or not, which is the same question you're gonna come up with in a de novo review, whether or not it's on the color palette or not. That's what I meant by that. So
Okay.
it's gonna amount to the same kind of question being asked. So,
Except that the whole application is not what's being brought up, only the one sole issue of
Right.
what the error that is being
yeah,
brought.
okay.
So it's not a resubmission of the entire project.
Exactly. I get that. So for right now, it's de novo. I'm inclined to wait for any changes that are put before council to vote on or to consider before we go any further with this issue, since we don't have any appeals before
I think
us.
Nathan was wanting direction though on what we feel it should be.
Okay,
So I think it should just be for errors, not a rehearing of what the board had decided.
okay. I'm okay with whatever the council decides with this. It's only in the case of the procedural way of doing things is that, and just give you an example, an appellant comes in and says, the design review board made an error. That's always required to say, in terms of my understanding of the law. And maybe we should fix this up too, because it's, the next question I would ask is, why is it an error, okay? I'm entitled to ask that question. I'm told that the appellant is not required to answer that question. So that's a quandary, and in my opinion, if the appellant refuses to answer that question, his appeal is denied in that case, because I have no information to make a decision on.
Yeah, part of this would be a recommendation on my part that when you have an appeal that you cite the specific error and what code section and what application of code section was in error.
Cha-ching, yeah, that works. Because it'll at least give the hearing people
And again,
something to work
we
with.
have to understand that we're not always dealing with attorneys, so you are dealing with lay people, but we'll have to make that, we'll make it clear in the code and in whatever forms we use for the appeal, so that they understand.
So I read over this now, I've had a few days to read this. So I'm gonna say a few things and you tell me if I'm understanding this correctly. So this is saying that all buildings are currently under the DRB and the 10 standards apply to all the buildings. However, there's not a strict or rigid application of the rules of those 10 guidelines, of the Argus guidelines. And then the bank building's the only one that has like real strict, right? Is that a summary of like?
In sum, I think the quandary was that the bank building, because the 10 standards are defined by the Department of Interior, and within the only place in our DRB that defines what a historic building is not within our DRB code. It's actually, if you go to the Department of the Interior code, that you find that definition. So the question was, is it really just applying to just historic buildings, or is it to all buildings? And there's nothing clear in there. You know, the best I can come away with from full
Exactly.
interpretation is that it covers everything. And one of the reasons coming to that is because the bank building would have already gone through that process. It would have been a redundancy for us to say, well, we're gonna make them go through all these 10 standard guidelines for the historic building for the bank, because the bank already had to do that to become a historic building as
Right.
defined by the Secretary of the Interior. So, yeah, and there's, because there are guidelines, because of the nature of the language in there, there's nothing, again, there is going to be discretion and deference to the DRB to some degree. It has to be, because there are guidelines, and just by virtue of the very language that's used.
Yeah, and that's the strict, rigid application of the rules part, like,
Yeah, there's,
because they're guidelines.
yeah, there are guidelines, there's nothing in there that definitively states, I mean, there's overall objectives, overall guidelines, overall standards, but it's still within the DRB's discretion on how those get applied. And again, it's no different than what you would look at when you were looking at like a BZA code, where, you know, there may be some things that, you know, like with our BZA, and you know, and Mr. Terry, you're familiar with this, that we have what we call the Duncan factors. Duncan versus Middlefield is a case. There's a number of different factors to be considered. Any one of them is not dispositive. So, you know, you could hit 7 out of 9 factors that are correct and 2 that go the other way, and it could be defeated, or it could be vice versa.
Okay, so let me just, on that point, is DRB able to make a decision that is clearly not within the guidelines? It's just not there.
I don't know how to answer that, because
Or I need an example, right? It's
I-
pretty hard to, in the abstract. I hear what you're saying though, Mr. Reed, like, but isn't that what the appeal is? Like, if there is an appeal, like, that they're going 100% against it?
Well,
Yeah,
I
I mean,
just
that would
think if they can ignore the guidelines, which is almost what I heard being said, is the guidelines are flexible and can be disregarded if DRB so decides, then we don't even need the guidelines in there. It's pointless to have them in there if DRB can go around them at will. So that's my objection to that interpretation of the guidelines. Most other districts that I know of take the guidelines seriously and kind of make sure that whatever they're going to approve at least touches the guidelines and is not standing completely outside.
well, again, I
these
think
things.
you have to make the assumption that when you're appointing board to this, that they're gonna take it serious and that they will apply the guidelines. You know, as I use an example, we have guidelines. One of them is distinctive features, finishes, and construction techniques or examples of craftsmanship that characterize a property shall be preserved.
That doesn't sound optional to me. That sounds
But
like.
no, but what I'm getting at is, what is a
Slaves,
distinctive feature?
craftsmanship
What is
and
the
stuff,
distinctive craftsmanship?
problem.
What is the distinctive
I think
construction
in that
techniques?
case, the design review board is capable of making that determination.
Exactly.
What's distinctive. They can look at the artifacts and the elements on the outside the building. They can.
Right, and that's precisely
Any
what I'm
ordinary
saying.
person can do that, but given that that building does have those things, and it says that they shall preserve those things in that kind of language, then the DRB could not go outside of that requirement.
But the
That was
DRB
that's my question.
Yeah, no. I guess what I'm getting at, maybe you're misunderstanding what I'm saying, is somebody has to decide what's a distinctive feature.
Right.
Is a doorknob on the outside of the building that's rusted, is that a distinctive feature? Or is it a colonnade, or is it how the gutter is designed? Which one is a distinctive feature of the building? Maybe there are parts of it that might be very well old and historic, but are not really distinctive to the building. And so DRB has the discretion to say, that's not really one of the distinctive features, we can bypass that one.
Okay, my difficulty with DRB, and everybody knows I raise questions about what they do all the time, is that they've done a really good job with identifying architectural features and what's distinctive to the building. And yet they've ignored that piece of ordinance there and approved or not insisted on compliance with it. So that's why beating this horse, you know, if you will, on this issue, because it's been a source of major complaints from people who are knowledgeable about the historic district and want to preserve it, and I think justifiably so. But let's
No,
continue
you're
the
fine.
position.
I think Nathan's looking for some kind of recommendations. So I think that what Paul's put together here, there's a lot in here that I would agree with. I think that having a difference between a district and a building sounds pretty clear. I think we talked about this before. We should hold buildings to a different standard depending on which ones they are. Because to me, when I go downtown, it feels like there's 9 or 10 buildings that matter, maybe a few more, but again, like Pit Stop, Lovejoy Plaza, it's in the district, maybe we should have a different set of criteria. I think obviously there's a need to have a rewrite, I agree with that fully. I think, this appeal thing, I think the plain error makes sense just because it's the safest, but I would defer to that. And then my only other question is, on an appeal, can only an applicant appeal?
No, it would be anybody that,
Agreed.
Show
yeah, an aggrieved party, yeah, so.
Which means a council person could appeal.
Yeah, and in my recommendation, again, as we go through this rewrite, we should use a full, like, we should think through all of these potential hiccups and trip-ups of, like, how would we want that to play out? How, like, because we don't want to set ourselves up where we're in a, like, circular reference of appeal and everything like that, we get nothing done. So I would like to see it cleaned up, written well, where every council member, every stakeholder in the district understands what the expectation is very easily, and understands what an appeal would look like, understands what's acceptable, what's not. And again, I think there's a difference there in district versus building, so I think, you know, clean that up. That would be kind of my overarching, but whatever the steering committee, that would be kind of my guidance towards the steering committee. But I am with Mr. Reed that I think we should let the process, I think I said that on the work session, we should let the process happen.
Any other?
Well, I guess one question I would have is in the short term, do we want to, is it council's desire to have that appellate portion cleaned up in the short term prior to a rewrite? Or do we just wait for the full rewrite? And again, it's up to you guys.
I would clean up the meeting piece, the 60 days for the meeting. I would clean up all the posting. I think my comment was I wouldn't change overarching ordinances, like I wouldn't change the standards, I wouldn't change the guide, I wouldn't do anything like that. But we should, you know, if we can get rid of some red tape, make life easier, cleaner for everyone involved, administration, stakeholders, council, everyone. I'm okay with doing that before the steering committee, but I would be opposed to doing anything broad stroke. So yeah, clean up the appeal, change the meeting dates, hearing, I'm okay with that.
So the appeal, so we're gonna get wording on that to look at. Then
Yeah, I think the discussion tonight was before staff just threw something to you folks in the dark, wanted to just touch base one time to make sure before we get drafted that we were in the same zip code as what the consensus was on things.
Yeah, okay, I'm willing to wait for the wording, you know, to debate the wording.
I agree.
Okay. Thank you. Those are our only 2 discussion items for this evening, and that will conclude the open meeting portion. We will not be coming back with any decisions before we head into executive session, so just wanted to state that. We're about to enter an executive session pursuant to Ohio Revised Code, Section 121.22G3, conferences with an attorney for the public body concerning disputes involving the public body that are the subject of pending or imminent court action. Do I have a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Second.
Pine,
Yes.
Heineman,
Yes.
Terry,
Yes.
Reed,
Yes.
Gianna.
Yes.
Thank you all for coming